Hey everybody, Christina Quick here, the Tarot Biz Mentor from www.theprofitablepsychic.com. Today's video is going to be the first in a new series called Master the Major Arcana, and we're going to be specifically working with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And this series is intended to show you how you can learn how to read tarot cards like a professional psychic. So today we're going to be talking about the Fool. The Fool is perhaps the most interesting card in the entire deck, in my opinion, because the Fool is actually the avatar that goes through the whole entire deck. We are the Fool. The Fool is us as the player going through the tarot deck, as the hero going through the hero's journey. If you want to think about it in terms of another game, perhaps you could think about it like Monopoly, for example, where you get to choose your little metal icon or symbol that you use to go across the board with. That is why the Fool is numbered 0 instead of 1. And that's why, if you're wondering, you'll see that there are 22 major arcana. However, there are only 21 doors or keys of the major arcana. The Fool is that which goes through each of those keys on the hero's journey. So just in case you're wondering about that, that is why that we have 22 major arcana, but we only have 21 keys to the major arcana. So upright, the keywords are carefree, innocent, and spontaneous. Reversal keywords are naive, foolhardy, and irresponsible. So the reason why I included reversal, so typically speaking, tarot, especially the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, wasn't necessarily intended to be used in a reversed fashion. However, many tarot readers do read reversals, and I do read reversals occasionally. Sometimes it depends on the situation, depends on the client, depends on the reading. However, if you are someone who does not use reversals, you can still utilize this information. There is a term called ill-dignified in tarot, meaning that the card itself is surrounded by quote-unquote negative forces. So an example of this would be, let's say you had the Fool, and then next to the Fool was the Tower, or the Devil, or the Three of Swords, or the Nine of Swords, or the Five of Cups, or Five of Swords, or Five of Wands, any number of conflict-based cards. You don't necessarily have to use reversals to use the reversal keywords and meanings, but there is a way to utilize that, and it's called ill-dignified. So the meaning of the card can change depending on the card that is next to it, and if that card next to it is has a signature energy of conflict or sadness or anything like that, you can use the reversal meanings in that sort of context. The numerology is 0, which is the void in which all creation gestates before it manifests. So we can think about the 0 as being the cosmic womb space that is before the individuality of the number 1, which we will see that in the Magician, which will be the next video after this. But the 0 represents that which is not separate from source. And we're going to talk more about this in a little bit about 0 being closely tied to the family unit, early childhood, and things like that. But the 0, you can think about 0, and if you want to remember the meaning of 0, if you want to start working with the numerology of tarot, which I highly recommend that you do, because you'll get a lot more context and meaning in the tarot, in your readings especially, is that the 0 is a circle, and in the circle everything is contained within itself. There is no beginning, there is no end. It just is. It contains everything, all of the elements, everything necessary for life to exist. And when the 0 turns into the 1 separates from the 0, and because it becomes its own individual being. Okay, talk more about that when we get to the Magician in the next video. The astrology is elemental air, and air is the secondary masculine projective and active energy in the 4 classical elements. The 4 classical elements are fire, water, air, and earth, and we're using the 4 classical elements in this regard. There is some debate about whether air and fire kind of are changed around based on pagan or Wiccan sort of doctrines and philosophies. However, it's important to distinguish that the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is not a Wiccan deck. It's not a pagan deck. It is a deck that was created by a Catholic mystic named Arthur Edward Waite and a woman that he hired named Pamela Coleman Smith, who they were both part of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is a magical system based on Western occultism. So there is a big difference between different magical systems and different and symbolism and correspondences and things like that. For the purpose of this training, since we are focusing on the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, we are going to be using the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Most of their correspondences I do agree with, and so that's what we're going to be sticking with for the purpose of this training. As always, if you have a different deck, then, check with the book or check with the author and see how they decided upon, which elements go where and how that actually influences the art, because every single deck is different, but most decks today are going to be Rider-Waite-Smith derivatives, and those tend to be the most popular. So air is the secondary masculine projective active energy. It is second to fire. So fire is the dominant yang energy. And so air governs the domain of reasoning, analysis, intellect. So if you want to think about it this way, air is our psyche. It's our ability to process situations and make sound judgments. Air helps us respond in crisis situations and problem solving. And in tarot, air is symbolized by the sword, which is a magical tool used to command and bend energy to cut and clear the mundane from the magical. So it's very much a matter of creating like magical thought forms. It's a matter of creating, distinguishing between what is the mundane and what is the magical. And as every practitioner knows, it doesn't matter what tradition you come from, all magic is contained within the thought, your mental space. Magic is generated from a magical thought space. So the description of the Fool is that there is a well-dressed person that appears as though they are about to step off a cliff into the unknown. I mean, we can look it up right here and see that he's kind of just walking towards this cliff, and he's got his arms kind of outstretched and he's looking up towards the sky, not really watching where he's going. And he has this little dog on his heel and trying to perhaps maybe warn him that there is a cliff right there and that he might fall off. With only a small knapsack and a trusty companion, the Fool begins their big adventure, their next big adventure. And so that's what this card is about. It's about adventure, obviously, because they are the player. We are the Fool going through the hero's journey. So what is a bigger adventure than life itself, right? And because they are packing light, the energy within this card suggests that despite being unprepared and despite lack of thoughtful planning, that adventure still awaits the bold. How many times have you heard this in your life? And the white rose in their hand symbolizes their innocence and carefree attitude. If we go back to the upright keywords, carefree, innocent, spontaneous, okay? So that's where some of these keywords are really coming through. And the white dog at their heels symbolizes that it's dangerous to go alone, so bring a companion or two to keep you company. Think about the Lord of the Rings. Frodo has to take the ring to Mordor, and he has these companions he takes with him. That seems to be a recurring theme in fantasy literature about the hero's journey. That ultimately the burden is upon you, but it's nice to also take some companions with you and to keep you company along the journey. All right, so let's go ahead and dig more into the symbolism here. Let's start expanding your psychic symbol dictionary. If you've never heard of that term before, all people are psychic, all people have intuition. It just kind of depends on how important that is to you and how much development and time and energy you want to put into creating your own psychic symbol dictionary. Psychic symbols are everywhere. We talk about psychic symbols all the time. If you see an angel feather on the floor, maybe it means that, an angel's nearby. An angel feather, I mean by like a white feather or a black feather, and then you can go on the whole deal where there's different colors for different angels and different messages. Or if that's maybe a little too abstract and not really relatable to you, there's also the find a penny, pick it up all day long, have good luck, right? So we see these symbols, and symbols are just such an enormous language, a universal language that we use day in and day out, and we might not even be aware that we use that all the time. And so when you start working with the cards, one of the best ways is to learn the cards actually is to just go ahead and put down the book. Stop trying to memorize the actual meanings word for word, because you're never going to be able to do that. I mean, it's just going to take forever to do that. And so, you might be someone who works with just the major arcana for a couple of years before moving on to the other, suits in the deck, or you might be like me and be the person that put the court cards away for a really long time. So if I could go back and tell myself, it would be to put down the book and to just start looking at the symbols, because the symbols are what is going to tell the story. Now, the sun in the upper right-hand corner up here represents the light of God of the Sephira of Kether on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. And if you've never heard of the Tree of Life, the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, well, you've got some new homework to look into, don't you? The Fool is... it's pretty much symbolizing the very top of the Tree of Life. You've probably seen the icon before. Just do a quick Google search for Kabbalistic Tree of Life. And at the very, very top, there is a Sephira called Kether. And it shines, it's where the unknowable is. It's where the Godhead, the God form, source, goddess, God, whatever it is that you want to call it, whatever your language is that you use, that is what the sun actually represents. The white rose in his hand over here on the right-hand side. In Catholic lore, roses actually grew in the Garden of Eden without thorns. And why am I talking about the Catholic symbolism and things like that? I'm also going to be giving out some biblical passages and other things like that, because the tarot deck, the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, was created by a Catholic mystic. Okay, so whether we like it or not, whether we identify as Christian or Catholic or not, or whatever our personal experience with that, it doesn't really matter in the context of these symbols are based on the Catholic and Christian lore. Also, we're going to be talking a little bit about symbols from Freemasonry, which are also tied into the Golden Dawn, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is basically Western occultism meets Catholicism. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. So for this series, let's go ahead and try to put aside our feelings or thoughts on Catholicism or Christianity and things like that. And instead, let's look at it from an art history point of view. But anyhow, so the white rose represents basically in the Garden of Eden, roses grew without thorns. Okay. And after the fall of man, when we're gonna talk about that with the number 6, the Lover's card. Basically, there are the two trees: the tree of good and evil, and the tree of knowledge. And the little snake serpent, convinces Eve to eat from the tree of good and evil, and by doing so, they begin to feel shame and embarrassment. They start to make decisions. They separate from source. Basically, they become a one instead of a zero, and quote unquote fall from grace. After the fall from grace, the white rose is a symbol of purity and innocence, because after that point, roses turned red, and they started growing thorns. And it's something to symbolize that the beauty of something, but also, the intense regret or shame or guilt that goes along with that. Something that is so beautiful must be admired from afar, or must be pruned to be able to enjoy. So it symbolizes, the rose turning red and having thorns kind of symbolizes a burden, a spiritual burden of some sort. But in the card, the Fool card, we can see that the rose is actually still in fact white. And if we look closely, we do not see any thorns on it at all. So that's what that represents. Now, let's move on to the red feather. So the red feather in his hat is a sign of nobility and wealth, okay? So the feather in the fool's cap suggests nobility. And that's going to be really important as we go along through the rest of the symbolism. It's important to realize that this fool, this person in this card, is likely from noble birth, is probably not a peasant, has probably grown up in the safety of either a castle or, perhaps the son or daughter or niece or nephew of a duke or earl or something of that nature. But red specifically, so why red? Well, red specifically indicates a person of very high status. And red, back in the Renaissance days, back when around tarot was actually being created, red was the color of being from a family of judges or other legal counsel. So it could be judge, could be some type of politician of sorts. And in the mid 1500s, as colonization took place, sailors would bring back feathers and live exotic birds from distant lands. And we see this as called the bird craze at the end of the era. Very interesting stuff. Google it, research it if you have the notion to. But there were even bans on peasants and poor people, prohibiting them from wearing the fashion of the elite. And as a common theme throughout the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, red continues to symbolize the martyrdom of Christ. Okay, so not only is he Mr. Fancy Pants from a noble family, but he is likely from a family of judges and likely or politicians, and also was very, very wealthy. Not only was he born in nobility, but the red symbolizes extreme wealth. But also it symbolizes, it goes back to that whole caste system, right? Where if we go back to like the reversal words for the fool, and we think about naive, foolhardy, so if this fool was born into nobility, then he likely has no real notion of, or no real understanding of the suffering and the pain, or, what the dangers out there in the world. It suggests that this fool has perhaps been spoiled, or perhaps has been kept safe from the impurity of the world, right? Very interesting stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at his knapsack now. Well, he's not carrying very much, is he? I mean, what could you really fit into that small little knapsack? And, when we look at this, it definitely looks like he is not prepared for his journey. I mean, maybe he has a couple biscuits in there, and maybe a little bit of bread, and maybe a knife. And that's about all that he can really fit in there. The eagle, there is an eagle. If you look very closely on this knapsack, there is an eagle head. I know it's very difficult to kind of make out, but if you have a card in front of you, it's a little bit easier. You can see the beak is facing the right-hand side. The beak is over here, and so the neck feathers are kind of over here. And the symbols, the eagle symbol is really interesting because the eagle head on the knapsack is a Jewish symbol for compassion. If we Rabbi Judah ben Tema, he in the 200 CE Common Era, he quoted, "Be light as an eagle to do the will of our Father in heaven." And also in Exodus 19:4, when speaking about the exodus of the Jews out of Egypt, the verse says, "You have seen what I did to Egypt. You know how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." And so we see here a theme that eagles are regarded as fearsome predators, even though they are part of the vulture family. But in reality, they actually prefer nonviolence to violence, often choosing carrion rather than hunting prey. I know at least I'm an American, so I know at least in America, the eagle is a very sacred, it's basically the symbol of our country. And it's regarded as like a very fearsome predator, but actually in reality, the eagle is really not really that fearsome, and is more pacifist. However, I think it's interesting the placement of this eagle knapsack because eagles have amazing eyesight. They can see things from like a mile away, if not more. They can see the tiniest things from a mile away. And I think it's interesting that the eagle is up here, kind of perched upon his shoulder, watching out for him, watching with an eagle eye. So that kind of explains the history behind the eagle, and what it could mean is, getting things from a proper point of view. Sometimes you have to climb the mountain to see things for how they really are to gain some perspective. All right, let's talk about his fancy tunic now because, we dubbed him Mr. Fancy Pants for a reason. But the fool's tunic is quite fancy, and that suggests that they are also from a noble or wealthy family lineage, as well as the red plume in his hair. The tunic, though, is really impractical. It's highly impractical. And it also suggests that the fool is packing light and not exactly prepared for their journey. I mean, what's going to happen when the sun goes down and it gets cold, right? This guy is going to freeze to death. He's not dressed in any way, shape, or form that he could understand the perilous dangers in front of him in the wild wilderness. And on the tunic, if you look carefully, if you count them, there are 10 round wheels, which represent the 10 Sephiroth on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. There's that Tree of Life again. So if you haven't Googled it, maybe you might want to pause this and Google it and just kind of bring it up a picture of it and get an idea. And these 10 round wheels have 8 divisions, which symbolizes a 2D representation of the flaming sword, which is also known as the lightning bolt that travels from Kether to Malkuth. So Malkuth is the Sephira on the very, very bottom. That's the domain of Earth. That's where we are. Kether is at the very top. That's the Godhead. And it's the lightning bolt. If you Google the flaming sword plus Kabbalah, you will see that that is a lightning bolt shaped formation that goes from Malkuth all the way up to Kether. And it's what it basically, represents is the path to enlightenment. Okay. So there is also speculation that the round wheels could also represent the Buddhist wheel of Dharma, or the path to enlightenment, which is basically the Buddhist version of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. And however, it's not really known how indoctrinated Arthur Edward Waite, or Pamela Coleman Smith for that matter, was in the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, or the chakra system. However, if you do come across any Freemasonry resources online, you will see that there are specific rituals about opening chakras. Now, because the Freemasons are a very, very secretive secret society, it's very difficult to know without, fully indoctrinating oneself into that system, how quickly and how soon around the time that this deck was created and that Arthur Edward Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith were alive, were they also, well, obviously Pamela Coleman Smith wouldn't have been indoctrinated as a Freemason because it's a majority masculine rule there. However, there are, certain things that have been taken from Freemasonry and certain things that have been taken from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and they all kind of boil down into this universal kind of truth that many magical, especially Western magical systems, kind of have in common. Now, the difference between, the Dharma wheel and the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path and the chakra system is that they are distinctly Eastern magical systems. So, it's kind of one of those things where we're not really sure exactly how much information he knew about Buddhism and how much information or inspiration from the Eastern tradition came into the Western tradition. But, suffice it to say at this part in, my personal journey in researching the cards, I've been researching cards since, I would say, with any measure of sincerity or seriousness since probably 2011. I would personally say that I don't personally feel that the wheels are, in fact, Dharma wheels or based on the Four Noble Truths or their Noble Eightfold Path or even the chakra system. However, that's the beauty of reading tarot, is that it can be whatever it is that you want it to be. And if you derive meaning from that, then that's, fully your free will, and that's fully your right to believe that and to see that and to intuit that in the cards. The mountains suggest that the fool's journey will be up and down and perilous with many challenges and obstacles to face. Mountains have always been an important catalyst to change. For example, Noah's Ark landing on Mount Ararat, the story of Abraham and Isaac on Mount Moriah, Moses receiving the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai. So, mountains are an extremely important symbol in art history because they represent so many important things have happened at the top of mountains, right? And so we can see him on top of this mountain here. Now, let's talk about his little companion, or Fluffy, as I call him. The white dog symbolizes God as the loyal and faithful companion who relentlessly pushes the rebellious soul to bring it to redemption or to be absolved of the confines of bondage or sin. Okay, so I know that's kind of a heavy statement right there, but that's a biblical statement, and more practically speaking, we will often see the white dog in Renaissance paintings depicting biblical scenes. A couple of those that you can Google are Christ washing the disciples' feet by Toretto, and another, the Saint Jerome in his study by Barsh. And you can see on both of those that there is a little whitish looking lapdog in both of those scenes. But practically speaking, small, not threatening dogs were also a sign of nobility in the 16th century, as one must be wealthy enough to feed and look after it, right? I mean, peasants and poor people typically didn't have extra food, and they had working dogs, but they certainly didn't have little fluffy white companion dogs by any stretch of the matter. And these little lap dogs were able to provide companionship and entertainment as opposed to the bigger hunting dogs, the hunting dogs that they would use to, herd sheep and to protect the land. Everybody had a little bit of land, and that's what the working dogs were for. They were the rough salt of the earth, nitty gritty kind of dogs that were there to be more protective guardians, whereas obviously there's really not much protection that's going to be going on with this little white dog. So, in addition, wealthy and noble families prided themselves on breeding hunting dogs, which was more of an activity that was reserved for those who had not only the time but the resources to spare to that. And peasants and the poor would have access to working dogs, but they would obviously be the mutts. They would not be the purebreds. They would not be the cute little white fluffy dogs. So, what is the karmic lesson of the Fool? So, what does it actually mean in a reading? What is the symbolism behind this card itself, and not necessarily all of the little symbols contained within it? Well, the Fool suggests that life is full of gamble and risk, and that positive resolutions or outcomes are not always guaranteed. However, the key here lies within the Fool that is seeking worldly experiences. So it's about seeking worldly experiences. It's about adventure. The Fool has yet to learn the concept of good and bad. Therefore, the Fool is in a reactionary state, He doesn't have any bias, and he doesn't have any fear that's overshadowing his expedition. The Fool remains open-minded to discover the significance and meaning of life experiences for themselves, which I think is really, truly fantastic. That's what we're all really setting out to do. And the Fool knows that there are much more exciting life experiences and adventures out there waiting for them. And their curiosity is all they need to convince themselves out of the comfort of their village into the big, wide world. We can kind of think about the energy of this card as being the bored aristocrat looking for something new and exciting, right? And because the Fool is carrying a light knapsack, it is intended that we assume that the Fool didn't plan ahead and may lack life experience or guidance to help them on their journey. However, this doesn't really matter to the Fool because they live by the statement, ignorance is bliss. We could also assume from the light luggage that the Fool doesn't plan to be gone very long, as in, maybe perhaps they're not emotionally invested and they don't have any expectations. All they have to guide themselves is their childlike wonder in the pursuit of their own happiness, even if they can't really visualize or predict what that might involve. And when the whimsical Fool shows up in a reading, the universe is asking you or your querent to put faith first, to trust in yourself, even though you may feel under-equipped, and you are being asked to just wing it and to just kind of go with the flow. However, the shadow aspect of the Fool, coming back to more of the reversal, or the perhaps the ill dignification, is that the shadow aspect of the Fool alerts us to just how unprepared they are for their journey. Should the Fool show up in a reading reversed or ill dignified, the card may be cautioning you to do some more research and to make a solid plan before leaping into the unknown. Be the eagle head on the knapsack. Go up to the highest point where you can frame some perspective and make a better decision. It also says that you may need a little bit more support for where you're going and to not make any rash or impulsive decisions. Okay, so I have a couple personal stories that I want to share with you that may help you identify with the Fool card a little bit more. So I grew up in a very small village of my own. It's a small oasis community in the West Coast desert that was predominantly white, Caucasian, and rich. I mean, pretty much everybody had money. It's a destination town where people would we had snowbirds where they would, people who had a lot of money would buy second or third homes in that city, that town. And it was just it was a town that was so isolated that you had to have a measure of wealth to be able to even survive out there, because there wasn't a lot of job opportunity. You had to have enough money to start your own business, or you had to be an entrepreneur of some sort, or you had to have a position within the city, with city council and things like that, where, there just wasn't a lot of, there wasn't a lot of jobs where you could actually sustain yourself. And so you kind of had to either start your own business or perhaps move away and go find somewhere else to live and make a living where it's a little bit bigger and more connected and not so isolated. But it was the type of town that everybody knew everybody else. I graduated high school with the kids that I went to preschool with. So it's like we knew everybody from day one. I always felt safe in my community, but I always yearned for something more. And when I turned 14 and I finally got to like high school, I think I was in ninth grade when I was 14, something around there, I actually began plotting my escape. I had an overwhelming urge to leave the safety of my village behind, because I knew that I was only experiencing a very small dose of reality. And I felt like my life was stuffy and it was stifled and it was boring. And I felt like I knew everybody, I knew everything, and there was just nothing left to discover. There was nothing new or interesting. And I've always been the sort of person to be fascinated with other cultures and people. And I actually have my Saturn is in Sagittarius. So if you are an astrology nerd, then Saturn return is every like 27 to 29 years or so. And Saturn's all about expansion. It's all about discovery and learning, about learning, really. Saturn's about learning. Sagittarius is such a interesting sign because it is all about cultural diversity. It's about diversity. It needs to experience diversity in order to thrive. Too much of the same thing, and Sagittarius can get really bored and destructive. So personally, I find that I connect most intimately with other people and experiences when there is a spiritual element to the bonding process, like sharing in religious practices or the preparation of traditional cultural foods with people from other walks of life. I remember being the person that anytime a new foreign exchange student would come into, the school, I would be the first one to try to make friends with them because I wanted to make them feel welcome. I really enjoyed hanging out with my Hispanic friends and learning to cook tamales and, things like that. And I always felt interested and alive and like really curious about the world and when it comes to different cultures and different people. So that has a lot to do with my Saturn and Sagittarius, but it also has a lot to do with the Fool too, because when I was 19, I decided to pack everything I could fit into a really small, tiny 2002 Honda Civic, which wasn't much. Basically, it was like I could only fit some clothes, my laptop, and my laptop, pillow, blanket, some things that were important to me, and duffel bag, and that was pretty much it. Like I really didn't have much. And I headed east. I headed east towards Kansas City. And that's where I've been since 2007. So I've been here for 12 years now, which is crazy. I actually left on Halloween Day. I left on October 31st, 2007, which was an interesting decision. It just kind of spontaneously happened. Me and my husband, well, my boyfriend then at the time, we weren't married yet. We got married. We didn't get married till we were together about 6 or 7 years. But I was with my boyfriend at the time, and, it's just one of those things where we were doing okay. We weren't doing great, but we were doing okay. We managed to keep things afloat. And we were laying in bed one night and we were just tired because I was going to school during the day and I was working at night and he was working 2 jobs. And when you're in that relationship building stage where you're trying to buy your first house and things like that, and things are crazy and you don't really ever see each other. And that's pretty much what our life was like. We said hi and bye, and both of us spent, our time off. Most of us, between us both, we had maybe like one night a week where we had actually time off together, and we would just stay up all night and we'd be dog tired the next day, but that was the only time we could really spend together. It was just, a couple hours in the middle of the night during that time. And I said, hey, what if we just packed up and left? Like, what if we just said, screw it? What if we just left? What if we just took everything we had and just went somewhere else? Just tried something new. And my boyfriend at the time was like, well, we could go to Kansas City. That's where he was from originally. Well, he was from Houston, Texas, but then he moved to Kansas City as a teenager, and he was out there for several years. And he said, there's a lot of job opportunity out there. I have family out there. I think we would be supported out there. If you're bored, I'm willing to, to give this a shot. And I said, okay. It was from that conversation to the day that we left was in a matter of a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks max. And so that was a very spontaneous decision that was made very quickly. And Kansas City is really nice because it's a really large, bustling metropolis in the Midwest. And because of its central location, Kansas City gets the best of everything the United States has to offer, because we get everything from the East and West Coast, the South from the North, especially in terms of diversity. So Kansas City has like tons of spiritual centers for all of the world religions. There's restaurants that are owned by first and second generation immigrants with the best food. I mean, there's a art district downtown that features installations from around the world. There's the Nelson Art Museum, which is just a fabulous, fantastic place to go and enrich yourself. And so when I finally got here, I felt like that's what I had been missing all along. And so I relate my experience of leaving my tiny town at 19 and launching myself into the unknown is simply fueled by the passion to experience all of the best and the worst that, the world has to offer to the full card in tarot. And that's my personal story with it. And, while it was the scariest thing I've ever done, it was also the most exciting thing I've ever done. I have zero regrets. It was hard. It was difficult. It was difficult for a really long time. And everybody called me crazy. But now I'm the one that my friends and family go to when they crave a dose of culture. I mean, now I go back every couple of years. And in fact, I'm starting to go back every year back to that, visit my family now that I can, and I have a business that supports my lifestyle and things like that. I have that opportunity to do that because I've created that opportunity to do that. But when I go back, for example, I just recently went back in October and they had a new Indian restaurant. And my mom was like, I want to try this Indian restaurant so bad. No one will go with me. Everybody's scared of it. I don't know what to order. I don't want to go by myself. I said, you know what? I'm going to take you. And she was so grateful and so thankful that she had someone to kind of, hold her hand and take me with her. And I, ordered all of the things that I really liked as far as Indian food goes, and talked to her a little bit about India and all of the interesting Indian people I've ever met and things like that, and all of my experiences and, doing yoga and belonging to ashrams and things like that out here. And it was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Life is but the ultimate adventure. So if you want to think about a quote for the Fool, this is the quote that I leave you with. And I also wanted to share with you a story really quick, a different story really quickly. And I promise this one is a lot shorter than the other one. But I remember my first significant experience with the Fool in reading tarot cards. So I had a client who was trying to get on, she was a singer, dancer, entertainer, very good at what she does. She wanted to get on to American Idol, I think the show was called. If you're not sure what American Idol is, it's more or less a show where people can go on and they can sing and dance and stuff like that, and it's mostly singing, I think. And then basically, they'll get signed to a contract. If they win, they can get a record deal and things like that. Well, I had done a reading for this lady, and the question was, she was wondering if she should apply for American Idol. She wanted to know if this would be worth her effort. Well, we did a 1 card reading and we got the Fool. And I basically told her in summary, that it's going to be unpredictable. It's going to be an adventure. I can't really exactly tell you that if you're going to have a good or bad experience with it. However, it's going to grow you. It's going to evolve you. It's going to be an excellent experience. You're going to develop on a soul level. And I think this is going to open a lot of doors for you. It's going to help you become more independent, things like that. So I never heard back from her. Well, I did, but she said that she was in the finalist. She had made the finalist for the show or something like that, something to that effect. And that was the last time I had heard from her. And I hadn't heard from her for probably a year, perhaps, after that reading. Well, she wrote me back to tell me that she obviously didn't win the show, but she said it was the best, most profound experience of her life. And she also said, she wrote to thank me because she said, I was feeling really scared, even though I knew this was something in my heart that I really wanted to do, but I just felt like, scared. I was scared because it was a new experience. I was going to be leaving the safety and comfort of my home, my friends, my family, to travel to do this show. And she said, I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for your reading. And it was just like such a powerful experience that I had with the Fool card and, actually seeing it work magic in someone's life. So your homework, should you choose to do it, is I would love for you to write out in your own ideas about what the Fool card represents in your tarot card meeting journal for when it shows up in different situations. So now what the overall energy is of it. I want you to put your thinking cap on, and I want you to start thinking about the context of the Fool in different life situations. So let's say, for example, on career and life purpose. If you got the Fool when you were considering a new job or career, what would that mean? If you got the Fool when you were considering asking for a raise or promotion, what would that mean? Considering going back to school, what could that mean? Love and relationships, okay? So single and not looking, single and looking, currently in a relationship, considering leaving a relationship. How does the context of the Fool, does it have the upright meaning or does it have the ill-dignified meaning? Does it change? How does it change? When does it change? Also for problem-solving strategy, let's say you're trying to manifest something to happen. What would the Fool represent? Having to make a choice. If you had to make a choice between 1 or 2 options and the Fool came up as a card in one of the options, what would that mean? Implementing a plan of action. How about reducing conflict with others? Like if you were in a fight with your best friend, and you got the Fool card, what is that energy telling you to embody? How about health and wealth? So let's say if you wanted to start a new diet or exercise plan and you pulled the Fool, what does it mean? Beginning a new medication or treatment program, or even how about investing money or making a purchase? So should I buy this new tarot deck, right? And you got the Fool. What does it mean? What does it represent? How does the context change? And as you're going through these, if you have any other ideas or situations that come up and you're inspired by these journal prompts, go ahead and write those down too. Let's see what else we can come up with, because these are by no means, this is a very limited scope and view of all of the situations in which someone may decide to have a tarot reading. Now, if you want a bonus exercise and you really want to drive this home and you really want to incorporate the energy of the Fool into your life and to really learn this card once and for all, think back to a time in your life where you had to take a leap of faith. Think back to a time when you had to jump into the unknown because you just felt that deep down it was the right decision for you. And even though everybody else probably thought you were crazy. Write out your experience in your tarot journal and find the similarities between what you went through and the meaning of the Fool card. Like how I was telling you about my personal story earlier, I want you to reach into your own life and I want you to pull out your own memory. And I want you to think about like the familiar feelings and the thought patterns leading up to you following your next big adventure. And so what this is actually going to do is this journal exercise will help solidify and provide a powerful psychological anchor in your memory recall ability to always have the meaning and vibration of the Fool card available for you to access without having to reach for the little white book. So again, this is all about teaching you how to read cards in a way that is, putting down the little white book, getting into an intimate relationship with each one of these cards. And if you can tie it to a personal story or have a personal reference to it, you won't need a little white book. All you have to do is just recall your experience. It will recall feelings. It will recall thought patterns. And if you also, look at the symbols on the card, it will tell the story of what that card represents, and it will add context to whatever the question happens to be. If you enjoyed this free tarot training, please consider giving this video a like and subscribe to my channel. That helps me out so much. And if you would like to leave a comment below and let me know what you found to be the most interesting thing about the Fool card in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. You can also share your personal story with me as well. I read every single comment that comes through. If you learned anything new, let me know what's new that you learned. Maybe you're a seasoned professional and you know these cards backwards and forwards, but maybe you learned something new in the symbolism. You can find me online at instagram.com/tarotbizmentor. I also have a free group on Facebook. It's facebook.com/groups/heart-centered spiritual biz support. It's also called The Profitable Psychic on Facebook, and of course my YouTube channel. And if you would like to, I would love if you would share this video with your friends. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you in the next video.